Hi, and welcome to Season 4, Episode 6 of My Words, Our Journey. Be careful what you wish for. I'm Monty, your host, and today we'll begin with Chapter 21. Marcus had a map on the wall in his bedroom with a red line marking the trail the killer was taking. Each morning, as his feet hit the floor, he was reminded of what had happened and what was to come, as if he needed reminding. On his desk was an older laptop that he would sit at before anything else and search for new stories, dreading what he might find. Today, he did not find anything, and so he went and fixed his protein shake, took out the trash, and prepared for the day. After a long shower, he decided to look one more time before getting dressed. After only a few minutes, an article that he had not seen earlier caught his eye. It was out of a local paper in Bristol, Tennessee. The headline had caught his attention immediately. It read, "Who is this Marcus you speak of?" As he read the article, his blood began to boil. The killer had used his name. As he looked at the name of the victim again and again, he could not make the connection. How did he know this person? Or who did he know that knew this person? May be the question. He didn't have the answer. Was there no connection? Is that why the killer felt comfortable leaving his name in the cabin? Marcus wanted to play the game. I asked him more than once, and Marcus wanted to play the game. That's what was written. He paused. The article stated this piece of evidence had not been confirmed by the authorities, but had come from a reliable source. It also stated the source had not said where or how the message had been left in the cabin. That would be left to the imagination for now. He had classes to teach and a lunch date with Samantha. So Marcus closed down the computer, went back and splashed cold water on his face, grabbed his backpack, and hit the road for the day. He had thought for a brief moment of canceling everything, but who would that help, and what would that solve? Better to stay occupied at this point, he thought. Driving was one of his simple pleasures. Marcus loved behind the wheel of his car. He took extra care to make sure mechanically and aesthetically it was the best condition it could be. He never needed new, but he needed nice, something that showed his personality, and at the moment he was driving a 3-year-old Dodge Challenger, a muscle car for the muscle guy, he would say to his friends. It was easily one of his favorite, mainly because of the power, but also it was just easy, the way it hugged the road. By the time he had arrived at the local college, he was feeling better. The drive had done its job. His class shouldn't suffer because of his life choices. He would teach his 2 classes and then have a nice lunch with Sam and hear about what was going on in her life. The killer stopped for lunch in Abingdon, Virginia. While sitting outside and enjoying a ham and cheese sub, he thought about his end game. What did he hope to accomplish, and how would that look? He hadn't really put much thought into how this would end. Now, as he was closing in on his final target, he was forced to put those pieces together. Writing on his napkin, he went through a couple different scenarios. Liking neither of them, he tossed them in the trash. It was while he sat there that the young man passed him and went into the electronics store next to the sandwich shop. It had been done before in real life and in the movies, but it may just work for him under the current circumstances, he thought. He had planned to get back on the road, but this new twist in the game would delay him a bit. Waiting, but the kid never came back out of the store. Had he gone out through the back door? Maybe, but why? Waiting was not always his best attribute, especially when his mind took hold of something. After a few minutes, he went inside to check out what was going on. He found the guy he was looking for, pricing some items in the back of the store. Even upon closer inspection, the resemblance would work, he thought. Now that he knew that would work, he went back out the front door, checked the hours, and went back outside to wait. This would be worth a wait, he thought. Just over 2 hours later, the young man exited the store, went straight over to a small Chevy, and headed out of the parking lot. He was ready to get as far away from work as quick as possible, the killer presumed. The killer followed the car out of town. Eventually, they ended up on a windy 2-lane road heading south. After 10 to 12 miles, the car turned left onto a gravel road and then turned into the dirt driveway of a pleasant enough older home. The killer slowly crept past the house, went down a few houses further, then turned around, a slow double back. There were no other cars in the drive, and he could see lights being turned on as his target moved about inside. Home alone? The game was back on. How I could find my way back to civilization after this, he thought. He waited 10 minutes, no activity on the road or at the home, so he parked in front of the mailbox, heading back towards the main road. As he approached the front door, he listened for voices, the barking of a dog, anything that may be a deterrent. Nope. The door was not locked. Why would it be, in this pleasant little part of the country? Entering, he could hear water running in the other room. The place was bigger on the inside than he imagined. He noticed the keys of the Chevy on the table. He would need those, so he went ahead and put them in his pocket. Things were about to get interesting, and he didn't want to have to search for them later. The sound of the running water stopped. The killer waited behind the door of the bedroom, and for once today, he didn't have to wait long. The young man came into the room, humming and running a towel over his head, another wrapped around his waist. The killer wanted no sign of a struggle in the home. It must be that way for this to work. So, just at the right moment, he sprang into action, tackling from behind, taking the towel out of his hands and wrapping it around his head. The struggle was real, but not enough to cause the killer any problems. While they were both similar in size, the advantage of surprise and the fact his opponent had a towel wrapped around his head and had to struggle to breathe and figure out what was going on was a problem for him. With quick movement, he strapped the man's arms behind his back, then with one good right hook knocked him out cold. While he was out, the killer went around and closed the curtains, turned off several of the lights, and made sure all the doors were locked. He did not need guests. He took a minute, found a sheet of paper and a pencil. In large block letters, he wrote, "Gone fishing, checks in the mail, work can wait." The sun had gone completely down, and the road was still as he made his first trip out to the Monte Carlo. In the back seat, he placed the man's loaded shotgun. Next, he brought the man out and placed him in the front passenger seat. He had seen an old factory with an empty parking lot just back a short distance, and that is where they were headed. Chapter 22. The next morning, while the killer lay sleeping in the Chevy Cruze in the back corner of the truck stop just outside of Wytheville, Marcus was again looking through the news feeds. It did not take long for him to find something interesting. It was from a Fox News affiliate reporting a murderous story of a road trip. Evidence recovered under a spare tire in the trunk. Food receipts from different areas where numerous murders had taken place across various states. He read the article top to bottom twice before he could take a breath. There was no mention of a cell phone, disposable or otherwise. That was good news, he hoped. What could possibly have happened? He couldn't ask anyone, and he couldn't even add his sister's case to the list of murders. He wasn't sure how he could feel about the killer being dead. It was almost as if it wasn't real. The stress of the final showdown was lifted, but not the weight of the guilt that may never leave. He took down the map, walked it outside to the recycling bin and tossed it in. He wanted no reminders. As he walked back inside, he deleted the text messages as well. He would do his best to move on. As Marcus tried to understand his feelings and what had transpired, the killer was beginning to stir. He was feeling proud of himself. Not for having a plan, it turned out to be a pretty good plan. He had spent some time going over everything one last time right before the shooting. But as he stretched his legs and took in the fresh air, he let his mind wander back to the previous night. After he had slowly pulled away from the home, he had made the left and then the quick right into the parking lot of the old factory. With the headlights off, they would not be seen from the main road. It was simple, really. He moved the man into the driver's seat. No seat adjustment necessary. Then he woke the man up, held a shotgun to his head, and forced him to drink half the bottle of liquor that he found in the cabinet at the house. After that, he clocked the guy in the back of the head, putting him out one last time. He was not that worried about bruising. There would not be much of the head left to examine if the gun did its job. So with a little positioning, he moved the man to the side, placed the gun in his mouth, hand on the trigger, and the butt on the seat. Then he pulled the trigger. Boom! Carnage, blood, tissue, and hair marked the driver's side of the vehicle. The face was not recognizable. He made sure the bottle was on the floor, and evidence was placed under the spare tire in the trunk, along with food receipts shoved in various compartments. And when that was done, he walked back to the house, put the handmade sign on the door, and drove off in the Cruze. He was smart enough to know there was a good chance the whole thing would fall apart within a week, maybe sooner. But really, he only needed a few days, just long enough for Marcus to feel comfortable. His grand finale depended on his target letting his guard down. If he did, the game was already won as far as he was concerned. Damascus was a quaint and peaceful town, about 20 minutes outside of Abingdon, Virginia. Cute coffee shops, art studios, bike rentals marked the main street. The town had beautiful views and was known as a stopping point along the Appalachian Trail, as well as a biking town for White Top Mountain. Stop halfway down for ice cream before making the final descent. And it certainly was not a place used to or equipped to handle a murder scene like the one found this morning in the parking lot of the old Sawyer plant. The plant had been closed for years, but back in its heyday, they could produce thousands of work gloves a year, sold in the biggest farm supply stores around the country. But, as with so much, they could not compete with the changing times. So roughly 8 years ago, it had closed its doors for good. There had been rumors about it being torn down or turned into numerous things over that time span, but they were all just rumors. So, as it sat as a reminder of better times for many, and to others just an eyesore, it just sat as a reminder. This particular morning, the parking lot that surrounded the empty building was seeing more traffic and excitement than it had in years. The locals had called in county as well as the sheriff's department for assistance. Tim Trotter was pacing back and forth, smoking a cigarette as he waited to be interviewed by the next round of authorities. He had unwittingly been the one to find the body in the car. He did not smoke in his car, so after leaving his home for work, he did what he always did. He pulled down into the empty parking lot for his first smoke of the day before heading into Bristol. Work that he had already called and told he may or may not be in on time. There were temporary lights being put up. 2 news crews had already arrived. Photos were being taken. And even though the sun hadn't come up, a small crowd had gathered. Sheets had been carefully put up several feet away from the car on each side. What was inside was just too gruesome. They didn't want everyone to see, or heaven forbid, get a picture. Now they were holding pattern until someone with more experience or the forensic techs arrived. 23. Samantha Nix had a problem. She had been fighting it for a while now, but the fight was becoming increasingly difficult, to the point she didn't want to fight anymore. She was in love with Marcus. Sam had admitted it to herself a while back. When they were out somewhere laughing and having a good time, she had caught herself reaching for his hand. They had tried dating in the past, but both had agreed they were just better as friends. But that had been a while. Both had dated, learned, matured, and she felt strongly they should try taking their relationship to the next level again. Only one major problem. He seemed really, totally fine with their current situation, and if she let her feelings be known, it may cause a big problem. She was not ready for that. The topic had not come up, with Amber's death and all, but she could sense that Marcus was faring better as of late. Their lunch date had proven that even more. It was the first time she had seen him let himself be happy in a while. Sam had tried to convince herself she was just feeling sorry for him, wanted to be the one that was there for him, and while that was true, it was true because she had fallen in love with him. But she could tell him? Could she? Would she risk it? That was the question. That was the problem. Her sister Stacy was having a gender reveal party over the weekend. She had gotten out of her previous date that she had asked a while back, really over a month ago. Now she wanted to ask Marcus. But she also wanted to take him as her boyfriend that she could hold hands with, sneak a kiss with, do all the things that new lovers do. Ugh, she thought. She had driven by his condo twice. Without stopping. Lord, give me a sign, Sam whispered. It was at that moment that her cell phone began to ring. When she saw who was calling, her shoulders slumped a bit. It was work. Sam was a nurse, and she had told her supervisor that if they couldn't find anybody, and they were short-handed, just to reach out. She didn't have any plans. Now she didn't want to answer it. Could she just let it go to voicemail? No, she couldn't. So, the next thing she knew, she was on her way to the hospital for what would probably be at least a 12-hour shift. That was not the shine she was looking for. As she made a left onto Spruce Street, she thought, be careful what you wish for. Chapter 24. Marcus had had a good morning. Training had gone well. His headache was virtually gone, and his mind was beginning to focus on things other than death and revenge. He still missed Amber so much and would always blame himself for what happened. But he also knew that she would be looking down on him sad, that he was not living his best life each and every day. That is what she would want. So that is what he was going to try to do. Finding himself with a couple hours free, he went down to the house and grabbed a few essentials and headed out to the high school track to get in some laps. The warmth of the day, the host talking through earbuds, the sweat, and even the aching in his thighs were all things that helped him relax and rest. He was zoned out after a mile. That is one of the reasons he liked the track. It was usually not very busy, but even if it was, he could stay in his lane. While one found his happy place, the other was still playing the game. The killer watched, like the lion watching a deer, knowing how this was going to go, knowing he would win. Timing would be key. When the time was right, he would know. Until then, he would do what a good predator does. He would study his prey. He was sure the man he watched run around in a circle had seen the latest developments. He needed at least one of two things to happen. One, the police would need to hold what they had learned close to the vest for a couple days while they worked the case, and or for Marcus to take a break from what had been the stressful situation for a time. He did not want his prey to be back on high alert. As he was about to close his eyes for a brief moment, he hears a car door just 2 spots over from where he was parked. A pretty blonde had exited the car carrying 2 drinks and a drink holder and was heading to the track. This could be interesting, he thought. The killer watched as the prey slowed down and smiled when he finally saw the woman. They hugged, even though he was sweaty. They were close. Their body language told him the same thing. The game had handed him an unforeseen gift, one he must use to his utmost advantage. They were cute together. Marcus had totally forgot about his workout, and she was clearly content sitting under the tree enjoying the shade, her smoothie, and his company. He thought she looked familiar. If they were an item, he would surely have seen her when digging around the musclehead's business. He would spend some time doing that once his prey was home for the evening. Until then, he would focus on the moment. The killer had been right. Marcus and Sam were enjoying each other's company. Sam had found the courage to ask Marcus to the party the next night, and he had quickly said yes. Sometime during the conversation, he had asked if he was a pinch hitter. Sam learned that meant he wanted to know if her first choice in dates had canceled on her. She was semi-honest with her answer when she brushed it off with a, "I'm going with the person I want to go with." That was as close as she came to telling Marcus her true feelings, but she was happy. They would attend the party together, and everything else would take care of itself. She felt good about that. For Marcus, he was fine going to the party with Sam. He knew her family well, and would find most of them in attendance were people he knew. He had told himself he needed to be around people. It was those times he found himself alone with his thoughts that the darkness crept in. He did feel like Sam was acting a little differently, and he couldn't put his finger on it. But either way, he got his favorite smoothie, so... Marcus and the young lady spent about an hour under the tree. Then they separated with a hug, no kiss. Interesting. Then he made his decision to change the game in ways no one could have foreseen. As the young woman drove off, something told him it was her. He should follow her. He knew a lot about Marcus, but the new player was a mystery, and he wanted that to change. So he followed her to the bank drive-thru, then the fresh market, and finally to an address on the other side of town. A cute neighborhood with older homes that were clearly well maintained, safe sidewalks, and a dog walking park. A nice place to retire or raise a family, he thought. He could see activity in the backyard. It looked like tables, chairs, etc. were being put in place for some kind of a party, maybe? Finally, a man walked out to the mailbox and placed pink and blue balloons on the post supporting the mailbox. How special, he thought. Pink and blue. Baby shower? Baby reveal. Either way, it was glorious. He had been excited about the end of the game before. Now he was beyond thrilled. Somehow he knew this was going to be special. The car was parked across the street under a shady tree, so the killer was content in watching the buzzing around the house. He had nothing else planned for the day. His agenda from now until the end, until he headed west, was simple. Make sure Marcus paid for thinking he could play the game with him, let alone win. He would be taught a very valuable lesson, one he would never forget. When the cars began to leave the house around dusk, he decided to drive past Marcus's one more time before calling it a day. Marcus did not live far from the truck stop he was staying at, so it wouldn't be far out of his way. As expected, the four-door Jeep was parked in the drive, and one lone light was on in the condo. "Sleep well, my friend," the killer whispered to himself. He would head back, have a light snack, and do some research on the new player. And that's the end of episode 6. Thanks for listening. I hope you enjoyed, and have a great day.